Let me now try to explain how we want to go about doing this roundtable. Basically, it's in three parts. The first part is the substantial part of the roundtable, where we'll be asking the questions, all four of us, directly to each one of you, and I think I'll indicate who the question is directed to. I hope you keep your answers fairly succinct and to the point. As you know, this is not a live broadcast, so we'll be editing your comments anyway for the newspaper tomorrow. So if your answers are too long and you don't get to the heart of your answer and I have to cut you off, then that's not advantageous to you. So I may have to indicate, when your time is up and move on to the next person or the next question. So in that part of the roundtable, we will be tackling, I suppose, all the important issues of this election and your candidacy. Now, the second part of the roundtable is where we'll introduce reader participation to the discussion. We have asked our readers to send their questions to us. We have narrowed it down to 15 questions, and we asked them to vote the 5 most popular questions that they would like to ask you. And we have those 5 most voted questions. And for that part of the roundtable, I'll ask Zhu Yong, who is our online social media editor, to conduct that discussion. So we'll ask each of you in turn to answer those 5 questions, and I think we'll want to limit your answers to about a minute each in response to those questions. And finally, the third part of the roundtable is really an opportunity for each one of you to pose one question to one of the candidates. So you decide which candidate you want to pose that particular question to. And that's basically it. And I think we hope to wrap it up in about 2 hours or so. And we'll be reporting it in the Straits Times tomorrow. And we'll also be uploading the videos of the discussion on Razor TV. Okay? So as moderator, I get to ask the first question. And let me start with a fairly general one. I think for many Singaporeans, this particular presidential election has acquired greater significance and importance because it has come very closely after what many people regard as the watershed general election. So can I have your views on this, whether you agree that this is a particularly significant presidential election, and in what way is it significant for Singapore and for Singaporeans? And for this first question, let me go across the table, starting with you, Mr. Tan Ken Lian.
Well, it is significant because we didn't have a presidential election for 12 years. There was only one 18 years ago. It's also significant because we are going through a time where many Singaporeans are finding life quite difficult, and therefore they are looking for some change, and they look at the presidential election as one avenue for a change. So those would be my views.
I think this election has heightened awareness and understanding of Singaporeans on the elected presidency. Like Ken Lian said, for quite some time we didn't have an election, so people are quite vague about these general elections. In fact, some of them think this is an extension of the general elections, because as when I went around, they asked me questions pertaining to bread and butter issues and things like door-to-door politics. So I think this EP will be an eye-opener for many Singaporeans to come to understand what the elected presidency is about, and also many of them has been awakened to the fact that the reserves will have to be safeguarded by the president, that the appointments also have to be the president also will have some say. So I think this elected presidency definitely has awakened many Singaporeans to the importance of the role of the president.
Well, I think that this presidential elections is very significant for a number of reasons. First, it is the first election in 18 years since 1993. Secondly, it takes place after a different political climate ushered in by the general elections in May this year. And then we are also in very difficult and uncertain times now. Singaporeans are worried about the future, and they wonder what can the president do, what is the role of the president. I think that there's a very vigorous debate. There's been some misunderstanding about what the president can or cannot do, and I think that this has been helpful with the IPS forum to clarify some of the matters. So it is very significant. It is a stage in the evolving of Singapore's democracy and political development, and I think that this will set the stage for a more participative democracy in Singapore.
Well, it is particularly significant because of the peculiar outcome of the general election. We have 40% of the people not voting for the government, but they got only 7% of the seats. So it highlights the foresight of the creators of this elected president that we really need a check, because the checks and balances against which are not adequately reflected in Parliament.
Can I take up one point that Dr. Tan Chek Bok made in his comments, that some people see this as an extension of the general election? Can I have your views on it? Do you or do you not agree that in some way or other this presidential election somehow has been seen as an extension of the general election, and some of the issues and grievances that emerge as a result of that election has somehow been thrown into the mix in this presidential election, and whether this is a good or a bad thing when people decide how to vote in a presidential election? Go ahead. Yeah.
Let me say that I think that it's very important people realize that the presidential election is not the second general election. It is not a referendum on the government. We just had one in May. The presidential election is about the election of the president, a different office. The concerns of the people are there. They have to be addressed by whoever occupies the presidency. But it's not a second round of the GE. And I think more people understand this now. When I was at Kovan City on Saturday, I think people made it clear. They understand the president election is one thing, the GE is another thing, and they are beginning to clearly differentiate the two, and I think that this is a good development.
How did, sorry, just to follow up on that, how did people make it clear to you that
They told me. They say that they know what is a GE. As you know, in the May general elections, originally GRC voted for the Workers' Party. When I went there, I was very warmly received, and they said that they recognize the difference between the GE and the president elections.
Well, I think many people remember some 12 years ago when President Ong left office, he mentioned something about the reserves, some disagreement with the government about the reserves. So most people will think about the president role as an important role is protecting the reserves to make sure there's some transparency. So they look at this, the role of the president on the reserve as the key thing. Now, I also know that many people find they want to have someone that can be their voice to bring their concerns and their issues to the government, their aspirations and their concerns. This is what they interact with me. Is this part of the general election? I think they want to have someone who is independent, who can look after the constitutional duties of the president, but on top of that also be their voice to bring their views to the government.
I mean, you are the only one amongst the four who actually stood in the general election. So I think it'd be particularly interesting to have your comments on it.
Yes, I was passionately involved in the general election. And I think I would agree with Dr. Tony Tan that these people should not see this as an extension of the GE. It is different. We are going to elect. The government has been settled. The GE has settled the government of the day. People have their government, they have their MPs to write letters, to attend to their problems, and they have been assured that whatever HDB upgrading program has been promised, is in place and will be pursued, I hope, and they have their estates being maintained. That is settled. The president election is a different kind of institution, mechanism for people to elect a person who will provide checks and balances on the government that they have already been, that they have already elected. If the president is the second key for the reserves and for the appointment of key appointment holders, then it is an overlay, an enhancement, you would say, of the democratic process where you have an additional checks and balances for the people to exercise. But having said that, I do understand why people regard PE, the presidential election, as an extension, as GE round 2, because there was a lot of unhappiness in the GE that has not been sufficiently addressed. And we had the Prime Minister promising to do something about it. He apologized during the election, and then he said he will do something about it. We have the National Day rally. He has given certain proposed solutions. Are they adequate? It remains to be seen. But obviously people are not happy, and I can understand that they want almost immediate answers to their, but it's not going to come immediately. Only 3 months have passed since the GE, so we would expect that the government would take its time to consider the options, and I hope by the time of the next general election, they will be able to say to the people, we have accommodated your concerns.
Can I ask the other candidates whether you agree with Mr. Tan Jee Sei's explanation that the role of the elected president is to offer a set of checks and balances against the government?
Let me address my earlier point, why I say that some Singaporeans actually think that the general election, this EP is an extension of the general election. I think when you go around, you can really feel it. And not only that, if you go to the other media, not the mainstream media, you find out the questions they post to us on our Facebook and our blog. There are invariably many questions asked, and you know these are all door-to-door politics and also day-to-day politics and also bread and butter issues. So actually my request to the mainstream media like Straits Times is you've got to educate our electorate on the position, or else I think some of the issues that could be raised for example at rallies could actually move towards the GE. So I think it's only partly the responsibility of the press to really try to educate Singaporeans that this is a GE. We are talking about the checks and balances that you have just brought up of the government in power today.
Can I address Zoraya's point about the office of the president? Because I think this goes to the heart of what the president elections is all about. What are the responsibilities of the president? Basically, two very important responsibilities. First, the president is the head of state of Singapore. He represents Singapore domestically. He rallies our people, happy times, National Day celebrations, solemn times, opening of Parliament. He is a symbol of Singapore. Overseas, he is a face of Singapore. He receives distinguished visitors. He leads delegations overseas. People judge Singapore by the standing, the stature, the prestige of the president. I think that is critical. The other very important responsibility